I want to welcome everybody to the teaching tonight and a big thank you to Great Plains Tribal Leaders Health Board, the We Are Warriors Emergency Operations Center for sponsoring this gathering tonight. Lekshi, it is all yours.
Okay, thank you to my grandson for the opening. Uh, thank you for all joining this evening. Uh, and this is, we're going to explore different avenues, I guess, of Lakota, the mental health of our people. So, this is going to be this series will run for sure through the month of August, and then we'll take it from there, I guess. Uh, for different people, there's different views of, uh, I guess, Lakota mental health. Um, but one of the things that I've come to the conclusion of um, is mental health is can be looked at a lot of different ways. Our viewpoint of mental health is different than the dominant society. Uh, and I have a friend who's not native, and when I used the word dominant society, he took issue with that. Mm. And I said, "Why are you taking issue with it?" He said, "Because I don't feel like I'm dominating anybody." So I said, um, "Well, this isn't directed at you." I said, "Look at it." I said, "Your people came here. You forced your way onto us. Your religion, your worldview, and it's still happening today." I said, "Look at the schools and everything around us." I said, is controlled by the dominant society. I said, the judicial system and the government and all of this is controlled by you people. I said, and your worldview. I said, and your whole purpose is to make us like you. I said, that to make us like brown washichus and melt into the melting pot, so to speak. And I don't know if I got across to him because um, he's not, of course, of our culture and our worldview, and it's a struggle for us to implement our own ways in any setting. Um, the school systems are dominated by the state. They they determine what the curriculum is. Now there's critical race theory that they're trying to control uh, what is taught, and it's crazy because I talked to one person and they're trying to implement this in the public schools. I mean, in the schools, grade schools and high school. And he told me you don't get into critical race theory till you're in college. So I don't know why Christy Nome is pushing that in the uh, middle schools and in the high schools. She said, but I think that's just another form of oppression. And Russell Means puts it across real well. He said that the government is set out to make the United States one big reservation. So I can kind of see that where he's coming from because the people are pretty much being led to slaughter, and they don't even realize it a lot of the time. So I'm going to share my screen, um, and I have a PowerPoint. Uh, it says host only the host uh, can share the screen.
I'm going to change that. There you go.
Okay. All right. Let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, we're going to talk about restoring Woópje Šakowiŋ, the seven sacred laws and life ways for well-being of the Oglala Lakota Oyate. My name is Hmuya and my wife is Shina Ikikjui, and we presented this presentation before, and I don't know if any of you were a part of that, but I'm going to use it again this evening for the presentation. So the reason we need to restore this is we've gone away from it through the Christianization of our people, through the school systems. So prior to European contact and then also prior to the reservation period, we had a way of life in place. Somewhere it was deemed that in order for us to survive as a people, they came up with the slogan, kill the Indian and save the man. So who we are as an identity of our people, as Lakota people, but also specifically the Oglala, Lakota Oyate, which is what we are on this reservation. And even then, you break down into sub-bands and even down into Tioshpaes. So we dwelled in Tioshpaes, and we had our own set of rules. We had our own laws, and we were autonomous. For survival and protection, we would band together into several Tioshpaes, and then that would have a name. So where I reside now is Porcupine, and here resides the Wajaje Oyate. My father is of the Kiuksa Oyate, which is over several hills to the east. Resides the Kiuksa, bites into people. And within that band, my father comes from the Motho Oyate and the Iyashita, the bear people and the bad talkers. So that he comes from there. So they have their own set of laws and their own ways of doing things. So it's important to note that these ways existed in this way. And so maybe if we were threatened by war, it would depend on how big the enemy was, whether we banded into several Tioshpaes or we banded into several bands, maybe the Kiuksa and the Wajajes together could handle whatever threat was threatening them. If not, then we would maybe call in the Woópě, which is the people in Manderson, maybe the Payabia, maybe Iyeska. So it would depend on who the enemy was and their strength. It would determine on how many bands came together. Everything, but we based everything on autonomy. So the chief of the Wajaje can never go and tell somebody of the Kiuksa what to do, and vice versa. So that's something that is not understood by the outside society. So in the 1800s, when this Woópě man killed this cow that belonged to these Mormons and came into the camp, this cow came into the camp. They were waiting for their rations, which was delayed. So these people were hungry because it was a very large camp. So a man from the Woópě killed this cow to eat it. And then the Mormon, who was trespassing through the land, so to speak, made an issue of it. So Lieutenant Grattan and 80 soldiers went out to arrest this Woópě man. And they told this man, Conquering Bear, who was an Oglala, to go and get this man and bring him forward. So he said, I cannot do that. He said, I'm a Oglala, and I don't have a right to tell him, who's from a completely different band, which is Woópě, and he belonged to one of the 7 bands of that people. So he said, I can't tell him what to say. I don't have that right. But Lieutenant Grattan said, no, you're the chief. So he said, no, I'm not the chief of everybody, just of my band, my Iyeska. So anyway, a battle ensued, and Lieutenant Grattan was killed with all his soldiers. But before they were wiped out, they wounded Conquering Bear, which he died shortly after of his wounds. So this is just an example of how we were autonomous as a people, and we don't tell each other what to do. So that's important in knowing that we were all, a one people, but each band had their own ways of doing things. So whoa, jump too far ahead. So who are we as Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, Oyate? So we all come from the Tate Ihuta, the source of all wind, the source of wind in the sacred Fesapa. People call it the wind cave, but this is our name for it. And there's different names for it. So this is what I was taught from my grandfather, how he said it. And there isn't one word that describes it. There's several ways to say it. And maybe you go among the Sichango people, they might say it a different way. And the Woópě people might say it a different way. And even other Oglala bands might say it the other way. So we can't get into this thing of saying this is the way it's said, and argue about it, which you see that a lot on Facebook. There's a lot of arguing they argue about everything on there. Right now, the big argument is language. And we're wasting a lot of time because each day the speakers are dying and the young people are not coming up in numbers enough, replacing them that know the language. So it's to me sad and scary that this division among our people has appeared over the language. Let's work hard trying to pass it on to the next generation instead of arguing about who's right and who has the right and all of this. So we were given spiritual laws to govern ourselves. Woópje Šakowiŋ, the 7 sacred laws. We were given a sacred chanupa, a pipe to communicate with the Creator. And inside that sacred pipe is also 4 spiritual laws. So you practice these spiritual laws when you carry a chanupa. If you do not carry a chanupa, then you practice the other 7 spiritual laws. But a lot of these same laws are intertwined with each other. Our spiritual laws, language, ceremonies, and customs are the foundation for ensuring a healthy development of children, which leads to healthy elders. And also, we were shown by the Woópě Oyate, the Buffalo Nation, where and how to make sacred offerings in the Chesapa, the Black Hills, when the sun passes through a particular constellation. So this is what is called the star knowledge of our people. And there's a map. There's a map that each band carried. And on this map, this piece of rawhide was drawn, the constellations and how they were positioned in the sky. And as the Big Dipper revolved around the Wichachpi Oanji Naji, we entered into each different time of the year where we went to a different sacred site on earth that attuned and aligned with a sacred constellation in the sky. So everything is based, the ceremonial calendar is what it is, and everything is based on that. So watching the sky and praying, we got all the time for the Hmuya, for the sun dance, for the different ceremonies on earth. And even when certain plants grew, certain animals returned. So all of this was based. So it was like a giant, constantly moving clock or calendar in the sky. The true holy men know how to read these constellations, and that's how they get the times to have the ceremony. So when you watch the Big Dipper around the Wichachpi Oanji Naji, which is the North Star, Washitras call it Polaris, and as that Big Dipper revolves around the North Star, that's how you get your dates for the sun dance, and you get your dates for the Hmuya. And then within each quadrant, it's based on 4 quadrants, which is the seasons of the year-round calendar, the spiritual calendar. So, where does our Lakota teachings come from? Wichachpi Oyate, the Star Nation. So Wahochpi is a term for a nest, name of the woman that came to earth from the sky, daughter of Hmupewi and Hahepiwi, or we could say Hahewi. She came in the form of a young, beautiful woman. And then there was Wichachpi Hinchpaya, the falling star woman, also known as Wahochpi. She brought the 7 sacred laws to ensure Lakota Nation would be healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So Ptesan Trokahawi, first white buffalo woman, brought Chanupa, the sacred pipe and teachings that go with it. So from the stars came this woman, and she brought the sacred 7 sacred laws to live by. So then when she brought the Chanupa, she came among the people, and according to the story, she came to the Woópě Oyate, to a man named Tatanka Woslanaji. And with him and his sub-chiefs and his holy men, she presented the sacred pipe to them. And according to the stories, a lot of people believe that she left immediately, but she didn't. She stayed among the people for 4 days, and she instructed the babies and the children, the young men, the young women, the middle-aged men, the middle-aged women, and then the elderly men and the elderly women, the Wakan. She instructed them as far as their role in living in their bands, in their camps, in their tioshbais, how to help each other and to survive, and how to live with this new pipe that came to our people. So we had 2 ceremonies up to that time. We had the Inipi and we had the Hamblecha, the Sacred Sweat Lodge, Purification Lodge, and also the Vision Quest. She predicted that we will eventually have 5 more ceremonies, which will make it 7 ceremonies. And so before that, we didn't have a way of dealing with a lot of things. So along with the sacred pipe and these 2 ceremonies already, she told us about the other 5 ceremonies will be coming. So these ceremonies appeared when the people were in need of these ceremonies. So one of them, an example would be Narig Luhapi, the keeping of the soul. So the story goes, a man lost his young son, and he grieved so hard that he was given a dream and to take a lock of his hair and keep it for 1 year. And through this keeping of the soul, he would learn how to deal with and teach the people about his grief and how to deal with the grief. Because we all know that in our lives, we lose loved ones every day. So how do we deal with that? So the healthy way to do that would be, we were taught to keep the soul. So the soul stayed among our people and helped us with our loss. So his presence was there to help us to heal. 1 year later, a teepee was set up. This soul, the lock of hair, was made into a bundle. And if it was male, then there was a small bow put inside the bundle, a miniature bow and arrow. If it was a female, then there was a sewing awl and sinew put into the bundle along with the hair. And then each bundle carried a small braid of sweetgrass. So they would keep this inside their lodge and feed the spirit and talk to it and like that, probably cry and sing. Till 1 year later, they tied this lock of hair, the bundle, onto a stick, and they would pray and then sing, and then they would push that pole and that spirit out of the top of the teepee, and that signified and the release of the spirit of this person. So that's how we dealt with grief long ago. So there's a saying among our people, Lulia Wakita, a Lakota worldview of seeing the sacredness in all. Why is this belief relevant? So the Lakota belief is that everything has a spirit: trees, rocks, humans, fire, water, earth, and animals. Lakota belief that we all come from the spirit world, and this impacts our worldview. and that we look at our children as sacred beings. So this is how we looked around all the time, and from this we respected all of creation. And we know we come from the spirit world, the Nagiyata, and we return to the Nagiyata when we die. So a lot of people are afraid of death because they're afraid of the unknown, what happens. One person I remember I talked to, and they were dying of cancer, and they said, what if everything goes black and then that's it? So I said, no. I said, everything does not go black. Your body makes a transition. It no longer your body no longer lives in the sense that we know, but your spirit, your nagi, will leave your body and continue to live on. So he felt better, and he passed within several days, but his anxiety was gone after that, when he came to the realization and belief that that it wasn't the end. So we believe that our ancestors and our family that's gone before us come and meet us when it's time to make our transition. So when we look at it this way, it impacts our worldview in a sense that we know that death is not the end. And then our Wakanja, we look at them as sacred beings. So we shouldn't holler at them. We shouldn't hit them, because it creates trauma within them. And you actually not only physically hurt them, but you mentally and hurt them, and you hurt their nagi also, because children are so accepting, and they love without condition. They love you no matter what. Even when you hurt them, they still love you. But you impact their development, their mental, their physical, and their spiritual development. So you see these little children, they're innocent. They're innocent till they lose. When they lose their innocence and they lose their purity, then they change. They're no longer trusting. They're no longer on the path of growing into strong, young, healthy, are into strong and healthy adults. So our common hope for the future is that we want all of our children to live to be old. Wichakchala nawinuchala otapikte. There will be many elders who are dear and treasured sources of strength. So when you break down the word wichakchala, it doesn't mean old man or elder man. And the worldview out there is that people even kind of make a joke about it. So whenever they say at a feast, elders first, then they kind of jokingly say, go ahead, go first, go on. Like it's something like to be made fun of almost. And we don't look like, in our worldview before the dominant society came here, and I'm going to use that term over and over. And if people get offended by it, I don't care, because they are the dominant society. They pushed everything onto us, even our worldviews, everything was changed. So we Wichakchala, when you break the word down, it's my dear and precious source of strength. Chaka is a word that means strong. We cha is from the sun, and la is a term of endearment. So, and then we Winuchala means coming of the moon. The moon, the female cycle is 28 days, and so is the moon. The moon cycle is 28 days. So the woman coincides with the moon, and the moon is controls their cycle of their purification cycle. So that is our goal. There will be many elders who are dear and treasured sources of strength. So I went years ago among the Arapaho people, the Woópě people, and I was amazed at this meeting how many elders were there present, all speaking their language, and they all looked healthy too. Um, this was back in the 1990s. I don't know if it's like that anymore, but there was a lot of elders, and whenever you go, like here among our people, and there's a meeting, there's elders, but not as many as them. So I said, they're doing something right in their society there, in their way of living. They're doing something right to have so many elders. So that is our goal, is to have a lot of elders among our people. So this is the breakdown of Winuchtsala and Wichachtsala. So the dictionary will say old man, elder woman, old man, elder man. But when we say we, which is the moon, the female connection, the daughters of the moon, we, sun, male, sons of the sun, cha, strength, la, term of endearment. So when you break the word on, what it really means is my dear and precious female or male source of strength. So for those of you that were fortunate enough to know your grandparents, I remember that they were sources of strength, that when you were just around them in their presence, they gave you a strength and helped you to be strong. And just their presence changed people's behavior and everything. So how they acted, they'll be maybe not very serious till that elder comes in, And I used to see my Lekshi, Oliver Rexford, do that at the council meeting. And he'll come in and he'll talk to them very sternly and tell them, when you pass this and when you pass that, these are the consequences, he said. One of the things that he talked against really strong is not to use the 638 process of doing things, because when you self-determination are, so recently it was defeated here on the reservation, is that when you 638 and contract something, you're allowing the government to get out of their treaty responsibility. So when you say we want a 638 healthcare, then they'll say, oh, okay, well, give us a budget and this is how much we'll send down to you, and then you're on your own, And they have that right to not increase that budget, and in fact, they can cut your budget down, take millions of dollars from you, and there's nothing you can do because you can't sign that contract with them. So to me, we were headed for a disaster if it passed, but I'm glad it didn't. And that's true of anything else you 630. So not to get into politics here, but he would talk about things like that because he knew what was ahead of us as a people. So that's no longer there now. No, there's nobody there to chew out the tribal councils. Too bad that's not there anymore. So when we talk about Oina Jitopa, the 4 stages of life, we come from the spirit world, Noriata. So we have things pre-birth, like singing to the unborn baby. Mother is not exposed to anything negative. Family and extended family looks out for mother and unborn baby. So I remember growing up, my mother would tell my sisters not to go to wakes whenever they were pregnant with my nephews and nieces. And not that wakes were bad, but there's a lot of emotion there, a lot of crying. And whatever mother sees and experiences and feels, so does baby. So baby can be traumatized in the womb by crying. And in the unhealthiness of our people, I've seen quarrels and I've seen fights at wakes. I've seen people actually fight. A lot of times too, there's also intoxicated people there. So that's, you will expose baby to that. And then the crying, because baby is still pure and doesn't know what a lot of things are of this world, you can traumatize baby. And then there's a ceremony called Tapi, the cleaning of the mouth by grandmother, the path predicted for baby. So that's Unchi says, cleans the path and says, Tokata takoja wachantognakina wiya washte she'll say. If it's a female, maybe this is just an example, but she would say, in the future, Takoja, the baby that's born, the little girl, she'll say, will be generous and will help people and will be a strong, upstanding woman or something like that, you know. And in some of the unchis that were midwives, they had a spiritual power where they could actually see the future. So they might say, Tokata takoje chagina, oyate ki wichai hamanikte, meaning he'll be a leader. So she might say he's going to grow up and he's going to lead the people. And then it will come about. So they had that ability to predict the future of the child. Whatever they say, spiritually, you will follow it. So, and the ocha of this unchi, the ocha, the ways of doing things and her demeanor and her character passes into the small baby. So if she's a strong, industrious woman who never gossips and creates trouble and always working hard, then that trait will be passed to the baby. And also, even if it's a male, he'll grow up in that way as a young man. So the path is predicted for baby, and then a Lakota name is given soon after birth. So a lot of times we would get a name at birth. We might get a name when we're older as a teenager. And then sometimes in adulthood or in the elderly stage, you would pass your name to somebody and then you will get a different Lakota name. So I'm talking about Lakota names here. So what that name does is it anchors them to this world. They have an identity as soon as they get their name. So my name is Hmuya Money. That's my name in Lakota, and it's called, and translated, it's walks with a roaring. So I was a baby when I was given that name, and it was given to me by my father's cousin. His name was Willie Wounded, and he was a medicine man. He gave me his name. He gave me this name, so I carry it to this day. So they go through a transition after about 12 years old, after they grow up to this age. So the young women go through the Ishananti Awichalawapi, and then the young men go through Wichasha Ihunipi, the rites of passage for both the boys and girls. So in the Wichasha Ihunipi, we have that ceremony where we have a young man, maybe in their early teens, or even sometimes a little older, and they kill a buffalo for the Sundance. So they're given teachings in the Inipi for 4 nights, and then on the 5th day they go and kill the buffalo. And they're given teachings each night in the Inipi before they go. So this buffalo is used to feed the people at the Sundance. So so that it is, what is happening is this young man is being taught to be a warrior and to look to the Ohukishni, the sick, the elderly, and the infirm, and help them. So long ago, in our societies, this is what the young man did. So if there was 3 sons in the family, 2 would hunt for the family and extended family, and 1 son would hunt for a widow or an elderly couple in camp, or maybe somebody has a lot of children, or maybe the man of the family is sick or something, maybe through accident or sickness, maybe they're handicapped, so they would hunt for them. So it was a process of sharing everything we had for the whole and the well-being of the people. So after the age of 21, usually a man would establish his family, and a woman, they would establish a family together, and they begin the process of passing on the teachings to their children. And then we move into the elder role, which provides teaching, ensuring social custom and spiritual order. So again, the elders in our community are the ones that provide these teachings to the younger generation. So each quadrant or each stage of life role was to teach the people that are coming behind them. So everybody had a role in teaching each other. So Woópě is important. The importance of kinship. It is kind of like the glue that holds us together. So it's important to have Woópě. So you have relatives that are by blood from both your mother and your father's side. Your mother, through your mother, you have relatives. Through your father, you have relatives. And how we helped each other was important in how we survived in this world. So it's still it's kind of somewhat intact today. That's one thing that, as much as the dominant society tried, they couldn't take from us, is that kinship. So I have Tahashis and I have Hankashi, male cousins, Tahashi, female cousins, Hankashi, and we pretty much help each other in what way we can, and there's a word in our language that says "Chiu onihampi," respect each other, have respect for each other. So according to the social boundaries of the Woópě, the kinship is like my female cousins would never come and sit beside me, and I would never go and sit beside my female cousins. We know that that's still intact today in a lot of the Teospais, not all of them, but in, like, say, in my Teospai, we know that Chicharipi, they say, that's practicing that. Chicharipi, meaning you respect each other. So that's really important, the social boundaries of our people. And that's the importance of Woópě, the importance of kinship. So there's Woópě Šakowiŋ, 7 transitions in a life circle. Every transition is a celebration. Hoksichala, infant, Wakan, child, Koshkalaka, male youth, Wichasha, man, Wichashala, elderly man, and then Wichunte. Wichunte is a transition back into the spirit world. So here we have the layout of a teepee and what each pole represents. So the example of a Lakota framework for individuals, families, organizations, and governance. So the 10 poles of the teepee represent the 7 spiritual laws of the Lakota people, and 3-star relatives, the morning star, the evening star, and the North Star. So you see the yellow circles represent the teepee pole of this tripod. So when you set up a tripod, you start with 3 teepee poles, and these teachings come from my grandfather, Thomas American Horse. So when he was alive among us, he taught us these things. And again, this is his way, this is our way in the American Horse family, where I come from. So this is not the only way to do things. And so before some people argue about, well, then that's not how our family did it, and that's not our teaching, we have to respect each other's teachings and way of doing things. Because your way is different doesn't mean that that's not the right way. See, we've got to respect each other in that sense, because all teachings were not the same way. So where did my grandpa get this? See, so maybe a humblecha, or maybe it was passed down for generations and generations. We don't know that. See, but the thing is that this is the way that he said it. So now it's come to the point where young people will argue with the elder because they don't see that elder's viewpoint, or they don't agree with him. And that would never happen long ago. If an elder spoke and told his teachings, you would sit there and listen and take in what he says. And you don't have to agree with him, but that's called wayu oniha. You respect him. So he's lived a long time. He's come through a lot of things. He earned that right to be listened to. See, that's the thing that we lost today in our society, is that young people think that they can contradict and argue with the elder. And a lot of times I give a lot of credit to young people that are educated, that have taken the time and made the sacrifices of going to school and doing all of this. But that does not, you have a college degree that does not give you the right to argue with the elder. So going back to this, when we set up the tripod, one represents Wichakpi, the evening star. The one of the poles represent Ampo Wichakpi, the morning star, reminding us to pray at this time. So in the evening star, you pray in the evening. Morning star, you pray in the morning. And then the Wichakpi Oanji Naji, the North Star, you pray at midnight then. So you make the prayers throughout the day, and then going into midnight. At midnight, you pray. Hanchokahan, they say. Hanchokahan. A lot of things happen around midnight. Heta de onie ki toki chakyapi. Okapcha kyapi onie. The okapcha means the air, the air and the changes. So if you notice, a lot of people, when they're sick, they pass during this time, because the wind, the air in the atmosphere becomes okapka, meaning it's changed, it's different. So they die. A lot of people die between midnight and early morning. So that's why you pray at that time. So sometimes when I go to bed early, I still wake up at midnight, like somebody wakes me up. So then I pray. Sometimes I'll get my sacred pipe, fill it, and pray. Sometimes I'll just pray, I keep these stones by my bed. So I get one and I hold it and I pray. I pray for whoever I can think of, maybe a relative that just passed away, or a relative that's sick in the hospital, or maybe I know of somebody that's going through grieving right now, like that. So there's always somebody to pray about. So whenever we put up these teepees, then we have the first tripod, which represent these 3 stars, and also the 3 dialects of the Lakota, Lakota, Dakota, Nakota. And then the other poles represent Wa'onshila, Wo, which is compassion, Woakwala, which is humanity, Woksape, wisdom, Wachanto Gnanka, generosity, Wohitika, bravery, Wa'ohla, and Woachintanka, which is fortitude. So these are kind of the spiritual laws that govern us and follow us. And we lived with them. We lived with these spiritual laws, and in everyday life, as we walk on this earth, everyday life, how do we practice these things? How do we practice wa'ohola, respect and honor? How do we practice wo'achintanka, fortitude? How do we practice wohitika? How do we practice wachantoganaka, generosity? How do we practice like woksape, wisdom? How do we practice wowakwala, humility? How do we practice waonshila, compassion? Because every one of these spiritual laws has an opposite. So I'll give you, let's say, wachantoganaka, generosity. The opposite would be Tawachishita. So Tawachi is your mind of something that you want. See, Shita is kind of not like bad, but different. And maybe even bad, but different. Tawachishita. So you translate that, and it's translated to greedy. So it's the opposite of generosity. So you give away everything you have. That you look to somebody, you don't give everything away, but you look to somebody. So you have 5 horses, maybe, or 10 horses. So out of them, you might have somebody that comes to your home that is walking, maybe a man. So you say, depending on where he is in the 4 stages of life, whether he's a Koshkalaka or Wichasha or Wichashala or Hokshila or whatever, if it's a boy. So he comes to your teepee, your lodge, and then he is walking. He doesn't have a horse. So you say, if it's a guy my age or your age, as a young man, he'll say, why are you walking? What happened? So he might say, oh, my horse died, got sick and died, or maybe he was stolen like a long time ago. Enemy tribe came. So you look and you have 10 horses. So you give him one of yours. See? So you'll say, pick out one of these horses and you can have it. So that's called wachantoganaka, generosity. But you have all these 10 horses, but you see him walking, but you don't ask what happened and you don't offer one of your horses. So there's a story about a man that owned 100 head of horses long ago, but he was never a chief because by hoarding these horses and having 100 head of horses, that was an example of him not being a generous man. So he would never be a leader or a chief, because that's one of the things that people seen you as a chief or a itkacha, was how generous you were. So he had a lot of people in camp that probably needed horses, but he was Tawachishita, and he hung on to his horses, and he accumulated the wealth of the horses without ever sharing, So that's an example of Wachantoganaka. And that is example of the opposite of that. There's another one called Waikia. When you have Wachantoganaka, you're a generous person. There's a thing called Waikia. So say you all come together and maybe as a warrior society, maybe you as a man, you belong to Oglala society. So you put a feast together among your warrior society. So you come and you bring maybe a hind quarter of a buffalo. Maybe you provided the tobacco for the ceremony and all of that. And then your expectation is that you give of these things freely if you practice Wachantognaka. But if you say, oh, I at the next meeting, you say, I gave up a buffalo hind quarter and I use my own tobacco, so I'd like to be compensated for that, you know. And that was unheard of in our culture long ago. So they'll say, well, we won't depend on you anymore because taku unyaku blena iyaki on this. What? Wa iyaki. Wa ikie. So wa ikie means like you want reimbursement for what you did. Or I gave up this much, you know, saying. So that shows that you wasn't a generous person, you know. So you didn't have a very good like standing among the people because you were considered a stingy man. So those are examples of the spiritual laws and how there's a opposite. The opposite of Wowakwala, the humility is somebody tell me of you listening, somebody tell me what is the opposite of humility? Somebody tell me what is the opposite? What is the opposite of Wowakwala?
Pride.
Pride, yes, pride. Always kind of like bragging, you know, telling I did this and I did that, like that. Give me an example of the opposite of Woachintranka.
Would it be weakness?
It could be. It could
about giving
be. About what?
How about giving up right away?
Yeah, giving up right away. That's an example. Well, both of them are good examples: weakness and giving up. Give me an opposite of wa'ohola. What's the opposite of wa'ohola?
Cheating and lying.
Cheating and lying. Yeah, that could be two of them. What else? We practice it. We try to practice these things every day. If we don't, then there's an opposite to it. So like say, who do we respect in our communities, in our tioshpayas, in our band? Who do we revere in our society?
Our unchis and kakas.
Yeah, unchi and kaka. So we ohola them and we respect them, right? So what is the opposite of that? I see it all the time.
Disrespect.
Yeah, disrespect. Like I gave an example of arguing with them. That's an example. How about how many of you been to a feast where they said, okay, it's time to eat? How many of you seen young people rush ahead of the elders and get in line first? How many of you have seen that? I've seen it, but you know what? It wasn't recently. It was back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, some in the 90s, but we're learning as a people to restore that. So now they say elderly first, or elderly sit still, you'll be served. But there was a time when that wasn't there. So they would rush ahead of the elders and get in line first, like that. So that's kind of encouraging that some of these things are coming back. I feel like that they are coming back. So we'll stop here and then we'll continue again next Monday at the same time. So we'll stop there and we'll continue next week.